Hi everyone, welcome back to the garden. On a day the BBC weather app describes as having a fresh breeze, it's certainly fresh out here. And I know that spring is technically here, I know the clocks have now gone forward, lighter evenings are upon us, but that doesn't mean the end of cold weather, unfortunately. And the next couple of nights here, we've got temperatures down to or just below freezing, so we're certainly not quite out of the woods yet. But before I start my videos talking more about garden design, looking ahead to the coming seasons, I want to talk one last time about the winter damage here in the garden. I know my last video helped quite a few of you out, I'm pleased it did, hopefully provided some reassurance that your plants that don't look great right now are the same here. You've done nothing wrong and it's simply a result of this extremely cold winter. But as this wind rages around us, I want to talk about 3 more plants here in the garden to show you what they look like, some spring care tips and what to expect over the next couple of months. So let's get cracking. So whilst the winter weather was savage for so many plants, even the green Cordyline australis here, the large ones have lost the growing points, have turned brown, but hopefully they'll bounce back from lower down the trunk. Smaller Cordylines here completely wiped out, and those I'll be digging out and putting them in the compost bin. Those are usually hardy plants, so the severity, the duration of the cold this winter truly has been exceptional. But when it comes to the large leaf plants, it's not just the winter cold that proved to be the main difficulty last year, it was also the heat wave that came in summer. Just an hour down the road from here, the UK's hottest ever temperature, just over 40 degrees Celsius was recorded last year. That's not ideal weather for any kind of plant with large leaves, let alone some of the exotics that I grow here in less than ideal conditions. So on to show you where they're at now and what I think they'll do over the next coming weeks as the temperature starts to warm up, hopefully. You can probably see down there an example of a small Cordyline. That one definitely hasn't fared very well this winter. Compare that to the plant that I recommended if you're looking for a lush, evergreen, exotic for pretty much any UK garden that will stay green. This is a Fatsia japonica and those are looking pretty pristine. Yes, they're common, but you can see why I grow them. They just look spectacular at this time of year when there's so much brown in the garden. But anyway, on to big leaves. The first plant I want to look at is Gunnera manicata. And these are 3 plants that I have in my garden. As you can see, I've gone for the traditional TP method of protecting them. Last year around this time, I uploaded a video unleashing the Gunnera, and this time you can see it's already starting to come alive again. So the good news is that these plants have survived the cold we had. And I think with Gunnera manicata especially, last summer was definitely the bigger challenge compared to the winter. These plants are incredibly hardy once they get to a decent size and with some protection. Remy's there running around doing his thing. But as you can see now, they're bursting through those old leaves and they're starting to get growing again. So I think this year again, if we have a dry spring or likely a drier summer, the biggest challenge for growing Gunnera is keeping them well watered enough. So if you're just going to plant one this spring, I potentially would look to a spot with a bit of shade. It's not necessarily what they need, but having a bit of shelter from the midday sun can help keep the leaves green and stop them getting brown and crispy. But over the next couple of months, these plants size up rapidly no matter where you grow them. As you can see, mine here are spread out. Are they spread out quite enough for the massive leaves this year? We will find out. But what I would be doing usually at this time is taking these leaves off, removing all these brown leaves and giving the plants good water. As we've got a couple of freezing nights coming up though, I'm leaving these leaves on top. There's no point in wrapping the plants, encouraging the growth, until I know we're just out the woods in terms of really severe cold. So what I'll be doing over the next couple of freezing nights is just putting some fleece over the top to just cover those new leaves slowly bursting through. Like I mentioned in a previous video, I generally think the first leaves to come out of your Gunnera, which are these ones pushing through here, I think they can be the largest of the season. So it's well worth protecting them from any late frosts. And now, as we're heading into the time of year where hopefully it becomes less about protecting from deep cold and more about covering up new fresh growth from late frosts, I do everything I can to protect these new leaves. I'll fleece on top of them, and even when I take these leaves off later this week, I'll still keep fleece handy just in case I need to cover the plants in case there's a surprise last minute frost forecast. Remy, as you can see, is eager to be taking the leaves off and cracking on, but with Gunnera, if you've still got yours covered, I generally would recommend a little bit of caution at this stage. But over the next few weeks, it'll be time to take these leaves off, give the plants a good watering if it hasn't rained a lot, and also sprinkle some chicken manure pellets around them. That really helps the growth. I would recommend keeping your dogs away when you put the chicken manure pellets down because this is what they'll be doing. But honestly, if you can put it down, especially on a day when it's raining, it really helps add nitrogen to the soil and improve the speed and lushness of the fresh new growth. So these Gunnera have come through winter really well, and I'm excited to see some massive leaves this summer. As you can see, they're usually majestic and robust fritillaria. This year, they're definitely not enjoying what this spring has thrown at them, and they're looking decidedly downbeat. But the garden is still full of that heady herbal scent. If you've smelt it, you'll know what I mean. But anyway, on from my good success story, the Gunnera, through to one that's maybe not quite as positive. But don't worry, this video will be a kind of good news sandwich with more enthusiasm and optimism coming later. This is a Tetrapanax, one of my largest ones here. This I don't believe is the Rex, but as you can see, the top definitely doesn't look great. Blackened by the cold, really hit by the freezing weather we've had this year. This plant certainly doesn't look good right now. But with Tetrapanax, if you've got a larger plant like this, generally speaking, it should only be the top section that feels a little bit wobbly. And further down the trunk, if I show you down here, it is very firm, very woody. So with larger plants like this, my best advice would be leave them well alone. It's tempting to start chopping them back, but personally, like I mentioned in my last video, I tend to leave plants as they are. If I chop this plant back now, then that section there, the fresh cut pit, would potentially be vulnerable to any further cold damage. So I'm going to leave the plant well alone and see where and if hopefully it decides to resprout. This Tetrapanax has grown incredibly quickly. We only moved in here in around August 2020. So as you can see, it's around 5.5 foot tall. So it will be nice for this plant to continue growing at this height. Realistically, it might lose a bit of height, but it will soon make it up. Whilst the young Tetrapanax in my hastily erected polytunnel, they're busy pushing out new growth. These ones look fantastic. Essentially, these are insurance plants. The ones out in the garden don't look good at all right now. Even when it comes to hydrangea, this is Aspera Bellevue. This hydrangea has definitely been hit hard this winter. And if you look closely, you'll see only the central stems have actually made it through. The others are like they're actually going to die back. And it's the same story with Tetrapanax. Definitely, to use a phrase again, a mixed bag of results. And this young plant here is one that's really struggled. So if you've got quite a young Tetrapanax, it might look like this. Unfortunately, it was just that cold for that long. There doesn't appear to be any current sign of life in this plant. It's nothing you've done wrong necessarily. It's just really a result of the temperatures being as cold as what they were. They're a plant that's actually quite tricky because whilst they are notoriously tough and hardy when they get a little bit bigger, when they're at this size, they're a bit tricky. Some people will say keep them in a polytunnel. Some people will say keep them close to your house. Other people will say they're completely hardy at whatever size. But when they're at this size, they haven't quite developed a strong woody trunk yet. I think a cold winter can really shock them. So will this one come back from the trunk? Potentially. Will it come back from the ground, growing up again from the roots? Again, it might do. But unfortunately, I think there's a strong chance that smaller plants like this, younger examples, might not make it through. Remy showing why I can no longer grow ricinus in my garden. Yeah, he definitely chews everything that you can find, but luckily it mainly tends to be dead plants, not living ones. Remy, Remy, Remy. That's the other thing, he just doesn't listen to me. So generally speaking, when he's barking and I am telling him off, it's more so the neighbours don't think we're completely negligent dog owners. If you're looking to buy a Tetrapanax this spring, then personally my advice would still be get it in the ground and make sure you keep it well watered this summer. The one that I showed you there, just behind the tree fern, potentially in that dry spot close to the fence, didn't get quite enough water through the heat wave last summer. It didn't size up quite as well as it should, but if you've got a young plant and you do water it well this summer, there's no reason why it can't get to 2 or 3 foot of trunk this summer alone, and at that size it should be tough enough to get through an average or milder winter if that hopefully happens this next year. But if you're buying your plant from midsummer through to the back end of the year and it is a relatively young plant, less than a foot tall say, I would potentially keep it somewhere protected this winter if you're worried about winter damage. Like you've seen in my polytunnel, the ones kept in there, they've come through just fine and they're already growing away. So whilst you might hear a lot of people talk about how hardy and tough these plants are, how they can survive anything, I think this winter's definitely been a bit of a shock, a bit of a jolt to some preconceived hardy notions. And it's often worth, if you can, keep a young plant safe for its first winter, and then when you plant out the following spring, it's so much bigger, so much tougher, and able to settle in quickly and hopefully accept more cold the following year. Before then, I move on to my third and final exotic large leaf plant update. To summarise those two, Gunnera manicata, Tetrapanax, they are both relatively hardy, and whilst this winter has been exceptional, I would hope that all plants of a good size, given a slight amount of protection in the case of the Gunnera, should bounce back. Your plant might look rough right now, but there really is a good chance it will recover. Particularly in the case of Tetrapanax, it can sprout from lower down the stem or the roots themselves. So my number one bit of advice would be, just leave the plant alone. Don't be in a rush to throw your plant out, and I think that applies to a lot of the other plants I showed in my last video, as well as Cordylines, Phormiums as well. With a lot of these plants, especially the ones with a woody base, there really is a good chance they can bounce back, and that can happen in mid-spring, late spring, even into early summer. So please, if there's any chance you can avoid throwing that plant out straight away, just try to look past it a little bit and give it some time, give it some warm weather, and then we'll see what happens. But soon, the actual period we'll be looking forward to is active growth, giving these plants enough water, a nice spring feed, and looking forward to some really big leaves starting to appear. So other than being prepared for any late frosts that do occur, hopefully we're getting to the exciting bit of the year when we can see this fresh new growth and enjoy a garden that finally is full of green leaves again. But onto the third plant, it's Zantedeschia, Hercules White Giant. There's a few different forms available, but I'm really surprised and pleased to see that they're already bouncing back from this winter. Nestled in amongst the bamboos and ferns, this is my Zantedeschia. Now, whether you grow White Giant or Hercules, this is hopefully what you're looking at. Personally, I find it incredible that these plants bounce back from such severe cold. This, I'll show you a picture of it last summer. It was a really lush looking plant, but it's a very soft plant. There's no woody base, but this is a plant that comes back quite consistently, and it really is surprisingly hardy. So all I did was basically cover the whole plant with fleece. It turned to mush, it flopped down to the ground, and things didn't look great. But it's not a plant I was overly concerned about. I had other plants like the palms I needed to protect more consistently. But when it comes to this plant, I honestly didn't need to worry about it, because just giving it that small amount of protection, similar to a mulch, has brought it through. And as you can see, it's already starting to grow away. So as these leaves size up, again, like the Gunnera, I'll just keep the fleece handy in case there's any late frost forecasts, just because I don't like the idea of the new leaves getting nipped at, and I like to give the plant the best start possible this year. In all honesty, I really am surprised that a plant that looks as exotic as this has pulled through. And it's not just this one, the one further up the garden looks great as well. Amongst the emerging Persicaria is this Zantedeschia here. So I really am so pleased, 2 out of 2. And for a plant that in theory you wouldn't assume can handle this kind of cold and bounce back so quickly from it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Just a quick look around the garden at a few of the big leaf plants, hopefully provide a bit of reassurance that all is not lost and we can be looking forward to some big leaves and lush growth very soon. But let me know in the comments below, are there any plants in your garden that you thought, well, you feared the worst, that the winter might have taken them, but have bounced back? I'll be really excited to hear your success stories, but if you've got any questions about spring care, looking after these plants through the late frost, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.